Guys for coming. I know that we'll probably be getting more people joining us very soon. And of course, hello to the people who are watching this on the replay. Okay, we have a very special guest today. And I'm going to introduce you to her, but real quick, wanted to do a little bit of a check to make sure that you guys can hear me. So comment and let me know that you guys can hear. And also just let you know, this is a conversation that we're having. So we're having a sort of a conversation here, more so than a presentation. And so I wanted to kind of let you know that they were very open to questions. Anyone that has questions about anything regarding logistics, we are here to talk about it and to have a conversation. Now, I'm happy to present our guest on the show, who is going to be, who we're going to be talking to. This is Orion Avidan, and she is a logistics expert. So what that means is that she is able to look at, essentially your entire logistics from the point of, of start to the point that it actually ends up at Amazon, if that's where you are sending it, or to your warehouse, and figure out not just the best way to get it there, but also the best, frequency for ordering, whether your orders should be larger or smaller, regarding the optimum profitability as well as cash flow and actual profit dollars, because there is a difference between profit margin and profit dollars, and I think we're going to have a little bit of that conversation as well. Like my husband always says, you can't spend profit margin, you can only spend profit dollars. So we're basically going to have a conversation around the idea of figuring out the best logistics. How do you figure out the best logistics for yourself to be able to make more profit at the end of the day, at the end of the year, putting more money in your pocket, right? So Orion is a professional logistics expert, like I said, and she works with Retail Ad Venture. For years, she has helped her clients to increase profits by streamlining logistics to save money on purchasing, shipping, and storage fees. Orion holds a Bachelor of Science in Industrial Engineering and an MBA, both from Tel Aviv University. She has worked for high-tech companies, startups, a hospital, an airport, brick and mortar retail, and many, many more. She's also written some academic papers and presented at international conferences. So she comes from a background of really, she works on this every single day, and she has a lot of great insight into what logistics should look like, what you should be thinking about, kind of shifting your mindset a little bit and how you're structuring things, and then how to, what type of people, what team should you be building regarding logistics to really optimize. So thank you so much for being here, Orion, and welcome. Let's see.
Hi.
Hi.
Do you want to get my video on?
Oh, is it? Oh, dang. Yeah. Frustrating little thing. They just updated. I think you are able to share your video now. Give it a try. I have to.
There we are.
Wonderful.
So excuse my desert background. I am in the desert, but you just don't want to share my entire household with you.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the new normal for COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So it's really, really great to be here, and I really like the introduction. I totally agree about the fact that you can't go to the supermarket with your margins. Actually, you don't always get the profits to go to the supermarket either. You can only go with what you have in the bank.
Yeah.
You have to be careful with that as well. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun talking about that.
Yeah. I really like this topic because I think it's something that we, in the Amazon space, we don't really, we think about it, but I don't think we think about it to the extent that we should. And there's a lot of focus on the margin. And there's, it's like, let me see. I don't know if someone's not muted. Okay. There's a lot of focus on the margins, but there's not really a lot of focus on, you know, actually looking at and playing out the scenarios. There's so many moving parts between fees and logistics and all the shipping. There's so many different moving parts that we tend to think that, you know, if we're getting a discount on a larger order, it makes sense. Or if we're, you know, keeping inventory at a third party warehouse, it makes sense. And no one ever really plays out the scenarios. So I believe that's something that you're expert in. This is something that you do every day. So why don't you just start by kind of telling us about what is a logistics expert? What do you do on a daily basis, and why is your job important?
Well, so I do two things basically. The first thing is I answer questions, what if questions. So what if I do bigger shipments less time a year?
Yeah.
What if I do a 3PL? What if I don't do a 3PL? And what I do is basically a simulation. And we build a simulation based on the question we're answering. I might go full blown randomized numbers and 7 runs, or I might do something extremely small and actually say we're going to actually assume the forecast is correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it's not relevant, the variability is not relevant to the question, not because it's correct.
Right.
It's always wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But what I wanted Ant to have is a business level answer. A business level answer is something a manager can take action on.
Right.
Look at a graph, look at the numbers far enough, have this kind of, it's a mini crystal ball saying, okay, we know this isn't what's going to happen in the future, but this comparison holds enough truth that we know that option 1 is better than option 2, or vice versa, or they're both the same, or last option is option 1 is better in such and such cases, and option 2 is better in other cases, which is a great tool where you can say, okay, if the market is bullish this year, I'm going to use this tactic and strategy. If the market is bearish, I'm going to use the other one, but I know it up front. I know what I'm looking for, and I know what to do when I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's very, very, very powerful. Right now, we tend to do, most business people I talk to tend to act on their experience. So this is what we've always done. It's always worked. Okay, that's good. Yeah. But you know, sometimes we have things that we're used to be doing. I have a lot of jokes about that, by the way. But we can do better than that. Why are we doing this? Because we've always done it, and it's getting us positive results. I'm never going to downplay that. What if we can get bigger positive results?
Yeah. Yeah.
What if we could get the same results with less effort? That is the what if we're talking. So that's number 1. And number 2 is actually saying, okay, we made this decision. This is the strategy we're following. These are the tactics we're following. Now let's put in the truth and make weekly or biweekly or monthly decisions. So I will be there to work with a customer to figure out what is the situation. Is it situation A or situation B? And what are the actions we have decided to take in such a situation? To the point where I can help them figure out, okay, today, this week, I need to order these and these SKUs from these and these suppliers. And move this inventory from the 3PL to Amazon, and move this inventory from Amazon to the 3PL.
Right.
And why?
Yeah.
So even if they count on me and I don't explain it, I always know the why.
Yeah. Yeah. That's and it's interesting because, you know, I really like hearing perspectives from investors, because an investor, I talked to an investor who uses our SoStocked system. He bought 10 Amazon businesses last year. His company did. And one of the things he said, he says, you know, logistics, he goes, cost of goods and logistics are the first things that we look at. And those are the places where they pick up all the money, because they see that this guy stocked out and it cost him 40 grand in that year. And then he paid in over storage fees, he paid an additional $5,000. That's $45,000, but it's not $45,000 when they buy the company. It's $45,000 times 3. So you're almost $150,000 that you've lost in the sale of your company. Those are the things that they look at. And so it's, you know, if that's the stuff that an investor is doing when they're looking at a business, they're going, okay, how can we tighten this up? Well, doesn't it make sense to, not even if you're going to sell your business, I mean, because you get the short-term benefit of having it, you know, impact your bottom line now, and then the long-term benefit of when you go to sell, it impacts your business, you know, in the sale price. But we need to start thinking like an investor does and start going, okay, what do I need to tighten up, rather than being stuck in the routine of this is always how I've done it. It's always worked. It's been fine.
I totally agree. Even if you go into the business and say, no, I am never going to sell this.
Yeah.
I want to be the next Nike. A tight ship is always better.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You have to run the ship tightly. If you want to be Nike, or if you want to sell at the best premium,
yeah,
you'll have the benefit if you think like an investor, if you understand what makes a business run.
mm-hmm.
And you're going to put your heart and soul into this business. You best have it sold in a way that it's sustainable and not being sold in order to be shut down.
Yep. Yeah. And it has everything to do with scale. And, you know, we talk about scale a lot, and the conversation around scale in the Amazon space is about systems, but doesn't necessarily translate into logistics and inventory management and cash flow. And I think that's the next place that the conversation needs to go if we're really going to get Amazon businesses that can scale properly, instead of getting investors. You know, if your goal is to sell your company, you know, and then investors come in and they figure out how to scale that business. You know, it's like we should be the ones figuring out how to scale our businesses, and this needs to be a huge part of that conversation, because, you know, compounding capital, if you can, you know, if you can improve your margins and turn your capital over faster, you can tighten up and get more capital for what you're currently selling, you can invest more faster, and it has compounding results. And that's where you really get into scaling.
Yeah. I totally agree. What I'm seeing is that most of the discussion around Amazon is front end.
Yep.
So it's new product introduction, it's sourcing products, it's the ACOS and the PPC and the new advertising options and how to get your listing to be at the top of the list. All of those are extremely important, totally.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry to say, it's like my diet. I need to diet and lose weight because my heart will be healthier and I will live longer, but I want to do it because the jeans will look better.
Yeah. Yep. We don't like to talk about, you know, the back.
But logistics is the heart of your business.
Yeah.
When you're selling on Amazon, there's nothing to do about it. And like the heart, we don't think about it until we're in heart attack mode and our IPI is low, and then Amazon becomes Amazon again and says, yeah, you know, next week 500, like it just did.
Yep, I just did a video on this yesterday.
I have to tell you, I've been tracking the IPI parameter for over a year now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally not surprised that they pushed it up.
Yep.
I shouldn't be surprised by the way they did it, although in the past they were more courteous with their IPIs.
Mm-hmm.
And my expectation is it's not going to go down in Q1. It's going to stay at the 500, and it's still not doing what they want. It might even go to 600. I don't see it going over that. If that doesn't work, they will find something else.
Yeah, they are definitely pushing in that direction. I think we're all seeing the effects of COVID, and this is their reaction to COVID. You know, I refer to it as a sucker punch, because, you know, you have a bunch of people who were forced into stockouts by Amazon's policies during COVID, and then they go ahead and penalize you by raising the threshold. the same time,
Well,
you have to be prepared.
IPI is extremely annoying, but it's actually not a major problem unless you're really bad as a seller. I'm sorry, people. But if you're working with the system and not trying to work the system, IPI is like a mosquito. It's annoying, but it doesn't really do anything major. If you do get a limit, that limit is like a box. You can fill it up, and once it's full, you're stopped, and then you empty it and you can fill it up again.
Yeah.
So you're not going to lose sales through the IPI. You're just going to work harder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you have
You'll
to
have to do more
start
shipments,
your house to get
and
it out.
you'll have to do more shipments, and in Q4 more shipments means a lot more hassle with Amazon, but you can handle it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm saying everyone should be getting their starting their houses together. They should be getting centers together because honestly, you know, we had a big wake up call this year, and we can no longer rely on Amazon as our only distribution channel. It might be our only sales channel, but it can't be our only distribution channel because we're seeing
Totally agree.
that, you know, we should be able to switch to FBM immediately. And if we don't have those pieces in place, that causes the stockouts and then with IPI as well. So it needs to be a rounded program. So I did have some questions that we can kind of roll into. What are the most important logistics metrics that you look at?
Yeah, so the first thing I look at is inventory turns, which is very similar to what you refer to when you say investment turns or cash turns. It's how many times do you turn or sell your entire inventory. Think of a merchant in bygone days, like the merchant from Seville. I think that's the name. I know it in Hebrew. Where he sends his ship with money to buy inventory and come back. And then they will offload the ship, and the ship will go again, and he will have to sell all of that inventory. And when it's gone, it's gone. That's a turn. Now, today we don't do it like that. We try to have inventory all the time. So we calculate the equivalent of all of our inventory. And when you turn your inventory, you basically created a return on your investment. So inventory turnovers is the shop floor equivalent of ROI. And what you get at the end of selling everything is you have your investment back, and you can reinvest it, and you also have your profit on top of that, and then you can either reinvest that or not.
Yeah, right.
But what it means is that you have money to invest again. You don't have to go and find money. You don't have to go into debt to make your next investment. As you roll your inventory faster, as you turn your inventory faster, you're accumulating more and more profit on that first investment. Because if I put in $1,000 and I rolled it, now I have $1,000. It's not new out-of-pocket money. I've already invested it.
Right.
So you can skim the benefits of the profits, and you can keep the business going.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just put a quick screen share up because I did something that we kind of went back and forth on. It's very crude, but the thing that is very impressive, if you take $1,000 or $10,000 as your investment in this example that you're kind of giving an example of inventory turn. If you have 3 months and your inventory turns once in that 3 months, but you make 40% profit, you'll actually make less money by more than double than if you make 25% profit and your inventory turns over every single month. So I understand why that's the first thing that you say, why that's the first example of, important metrics. Inventory turn it's huge. It's huge, and we have these high MOQs sometimes. Is it something advise your clients to try to talk their MOQs down and just order more frequently, or how do you tend to?
Oh, there's a ton of work to be done there. Yes, if you can reduce your MOQs, that's a good way to go about it, but there's a lot to be done. And what we try to do is work within the MOQs first. So most Amazon sellers are actually quite small sellers
Mm-hmm.
as far as the production, the suppliers view them.
Yeah.
And we work with the MOQs. There's a way to buffer, to actually decouple the front end of your business from that back end MOQ. And whilst you're still going to be able to need to order big quantities, you will feel like you're getting smaller, faster shipments. It's a process. You have to fill up your supply chain for this to happen. But when you do that, you start working at a much higher velocity. You don't stock out on your bestsellers. You have a good balance, a good amount of everything. You don't have to discount slow sellers. You can let them sell at the pace they're selling. So you have more profit on everything. On the best sellers because you don't stock out of them, on the slow sellers because you don't discount them.
Mm-hmm.
And you create a very good base of stability, which then allows you to go back to your supplier and say, I would like to change to talk about terms.
Mm-hmm.
What can be done? I am growing.
Mm-hmm.
Here, I've grown this much lately. Can you? I've had a supplier come back and say, well, you've grown enough. We're going to give you your own line and cut your supply times by half because you don't have to wait in queue for other people.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
So you're.
we've had suppliers say, oh, it's no problem. You can create a buffer at the end of our line and only pay when you pull from it.
Mm. Oh, wow. Yeah.
I've had such great reactions from suppliers all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And my take on it, and I've never asked anybody, is here comes a buyer that says, I want to talk to you about something that's not money. You can have your profit margin. That's okay. Help me to sell more.
Yeah.
And the supplier says, hey, that's nice. I'm going to make more money with this guy
Mm-hmm.
because he's not fighting me for another 5-10%, 5-10 cent discount. And he's going to sell more. I'll help him.
Right. Yeah.
So you can get a lot of cooperation. Not everything can be done, and you have to come in with a willing mind, understanding, come in and tell the supplier, we will not let you lose. We're not going to go for a win-lose situation.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be a win for both of us. And you will get good cooperation.
Uh-huh. That's great.
And the other thing I want to say about inventory turns is, I know it doesn't really look like this, but basically IPI is a very complex way trying to hide out the fact that Amazon is saying, we want you to sell faster, we want you to have more inventory turns. Because what are they talking about? Don't have slow inventory, please. Don't have better sell-through, and don't stock out. All of those are the mainstays of inventory turns.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep.
When we look at inventory, the important thing to look is how many days of sales do you have in your entire pipeline, and how many days of sales do you need to have. Days of sales, basically, as it sounds, is how many am I selling on average on a day?
Mm-hmm.
So I divide my inventory by the daily amount. I have the number of days this inventory represents.
Mm-hmm.
And you create your target in order to ensure that you never run out. So you have enough time in your supply chain to resupply before you run out.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just track it.
Yeah.
I wrote myself some notes, so just to make sure. And of course, have a buffer there. Always work with some kind of, in Yiddish we say spiel, some kind of extra. So if something goes wrong, if the ship gets delayed, if you get stuck in customs,
Yeah.
you still have enough.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
and the last thing is track your velocities and change, and specifically be very keen and aware of changes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I have seen items change velocity, and I have seen sellers stay stuck on the old velocity.
Mm-hmm.
This is my bestseller. It hasn't sold the bestseller for 3 months now.
Yeah.
You have to be very keenly aware. And the other thing is you have to do it for the entire line. And if you have 1,000 SKUs, it's not something you can do in your head.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to peers who do this with big chain stores. And you go to a store and they will know without any help what's their number one, their number two, and the number three bestsellers.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't know what's number 7.
Yeah.
And number 7 is a good seller. It's not a good seller. It's a terrific seller.
Yeah.
And they're probably very focused on never stocking out of number 1, 2, and 3. But more often than not, they don't have number 7 available.
Yeah. Good point. Right. So how do you build a team? Like what, if someone wants to improve their logistics and, really get things tightened up, what sort of a team would you have to put in place to be able to handle your inventory management and your cash flow?
Well, a lot of sellers don't have the bandwidth financially to start a team. So I'm focusing on roles, and you can do these yourself. You just have to realize that each role is separate. You can't create a fruit salad and say, I'm doing everything at once. No, you have to do them separately and take one hat off and put the next hat on. And some of these are more strategic, so you do them once every year, once every 6 months, and others are more day to day. So the first one is your job as a boss is to create your target and strategy.
Mm-hmm.
You should decide, you can change your mind later, but you should decide, where are you going? How big do you want to be? Is it a flip? Very short, very aggressive and sell out? Or is it something that's more long term, but you are planning an exit strategy?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you want to try to go for the big league.
Yeah.
You have to decide that target. You have to know where you're going so you can always check your compass. And I'm sorry about my accent, by the way. I sound weird to myself, but I can't help it. And your strategy, what is the way you're going to get there? So if we go back to geography, are you going to take a bus, a train, your car, you walk, you bike, etc.? It's still not the tactics, the actual actions you're going to take. The strategy talks about how you're going to react to things. What are you going to measure? How do you know you're on track or off track?
Mm-hmm.
After that, you start talking about tactics, the actual ways you're going to behave and act. What are your SOPs? What are your, I call them stoplights?
Mm-hmm.
What signals are you looking for in the market to know if you have to start, go, turn, etc.? And those two are very much once a year, I would say.
Yeah.
You revisit them quarterly just to check to make sure you're on track and everything. Nothing really major changed, but you don't have to redo them often. You maybe even don't redo them ever.
Right.
Now we're going to start getting into more of the operational sides of things. So your first thing is you need to have a solution for forecasting and planning. Now, when I talk to people about replenishment, they immediately say, I have a forecast. You do need a forecast, but your forecast is not translated automatically into a replenishment decision. It's not, this is what I forecasted, therefore I buy it.
Yeah.
And I've written an article a while ago about why forecasting in retail is extremely, extremely problematic. If last year's sales weren't really good, if you had stock out situations, they will skew your forecast, because actually you're not trying to forecast sales.
Yeah.
You're trying to forecast demand. And we don't have demand. When we look at the weather, we try to forecast the weather. What do we feed into the algorithm? Weather. What do we take out of it? Weather. And and the weather does what the weather wants. It doesn't react to anything we do. We can't change the weather. It's not a dependent, it's an independent parameter.
Right.
And the independent parameter in retail is demand. But we don't have that. So we use sales to approximate it.
Yeah.
And that data is wrong. And I know SoStocked does a very good job at figuring out where is the sales data not representative well enough of our demand and trying to fix it. But even once we do fix it, I'm going to try and move away from that chair. Even when we do fix it, we have to remember that the forecast is going to be wrong, because we're forecasting we're trying to forecast very granular detail for a very long time.
Yeah.
Weather forecast has become really good from today to tomorrow. But we don't care what's going to sell tomorrow. We want to know what's going to sell in December, right now in August.
Yeah.
And that, by design, because of the way statistics work, has huge variability.
Yeah.
And so even if you have a forecast and you say, this is a really good forecast, 50% of it will be too much and 50% of it will be too little, and you'll never know which one is which.
Yep.
Even if it's a really good forecast.
Yeah.
And what replenishment comes in and does is then takes that forecast and creates those operating procedures that tell us, how do we manage making a decision now for something that is going to happen 3 months, 4 months from now, maybe even more, that we know we don't know the data for.
Yeah.
And there are ways to go about doing it. So your forecast isn't your decision maker. It's just one piece of data in the puzzle.
So what is some of that missing data then? If we've got a forecast and we know that it's, variable, I mean, most of the time, you can look at, okay, I've got my forecast for the next 6 months, but that's just an estimate. And you're always looking at, okay, that's going to change. I only care about my next order, and I have some idea of what my future orders are going to be. What are some of the other pieces to that puzzle?
Well, here's the thing. This is what we do, is we know we don't know, and we know next week we're going to know another 7 days of data. And the week after that, we'll know more and more and more. So instead of making this 4-month order right away, we're going to chop it down and we're going to make smaller, faster decisions. So I'm going to look today and I'm going to say, of all my SKUs from supplier A, I've got 7 that reached MOQ, and I've got the total MOQ for an order on that. I'm going to order only those. Now next week, they will be over my target because I just made an order for them. They will not get ordered again. And I will get other SKUs reaching the point where it makes sense to order a full MOQ for them. And that way I'm going to flow my inventory in my supply chain. And as I grow, I will come to the point where my bestsellers get a weekly order. And I will order them weekly. I will not batch this up. And I will work with my supplier to produce these weekly orders as ordered and not batch them up.
And now how does that affect your, okay, so because they're doing it weekly, you're hitting, so you're saying you're hitting the MOQ on a weekly basis? So, okay, so then and 2 questions. One is, how does that affect the shipping? if you're shipping weekly rather than, because we got a lot of people who ship, full containers, you're saying that the inventory turn is more important than the savings on shipping?
Totally, 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 totally. First of all, we do not just let costs run amok. We do not ignore that and say, Orion said that's what you do. We look at it very, very fine detail and figure out, maybe we need to change the way we ship. Maybe we can find a shipping supplier that can piggyback us with other people into a container. Or maybe we create a co-op to do the full containers together. Of course, we want to get a full container. The smaller ones, though, I've done a check. It is so much better to do smaller containers. But it depends on a lot of stuff. You always have to do the math, and I don't fight with math.
Yeah.
If the numbers say, Orion, let's do, instead of an MOQ, a full container, because even with storage, even with this, that, and the other, it's still better.
Yeah.
And that's what we do.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of, it sounds like there's a lot of emphasis on working with suppliers regarding changing up your terms. Because if you say, well, I'm going to order once a week, but please, like allowing them to, I guess, hold stuff for you or prepare stuff early, but you're controlling the cash flow because it's not as important. It's kind of divorcing this idea of inventory and cash flow going hand in hand. You're kind of going, okay, what can I do with the terms and with controlling the cash? Because the cash is really the asset that we're trying to juggle here.
It's definitely not divorcing the inventory from the cash flow. It's actually it's actually renewing the vows, getting even more married. Because what happens when you do this 4 months order is that you create spikes in your expenses, in your expense flow. And right now, you did this big order, you have to pay 30% of it down payments, let's say.
Yeah.
And you're pretty good with that. And then you know that down the line, about, let's say, 2 months or 3 months, you're going to have to pay the difference.
Yeah.
And you're very optimistic that you're going to have really good months and you'll have that cash. But you have to be extremely, extremely disciplined about preparing it.
Yeah.
Or in 3 months' time, suddenly it jumps on you. I mean, it's in the future, it's in the future, it's in the future, it's today.
Yeah.
And you suddenly have to cough up this big lump sum that you don't always know where it's going to come because you haven't sold a unit yet.
Yeah.
I've actually done a little check today, and if you do the numbers, well, at least the way I look at it, from the moment you commit to buying something, your cash to cash, from the moment you pay that down payment and have become committed to paying the rest of those payments on a shipment until you have sold all of it, assuming a 90-day sell cycle, which is probably what most Amazon sellers are talking about. You say, I want to have 90 days of inventory in Amazon, so you're expecting to sell that in 90 days. Amazon sellers are facing above 200 days cash to cash. Amazon itself has a negative cash to cash cycle. Totally different story. Now, part of this is the fact that it doesn't own all of the inventory that it sells, because it sells our inventory.
Right.
And the cash it gets for our inventory stays with it for a week or two or more.
More now, that account that started in past 2017. Yeah.
That makes their cash to cash cycle amazingly good. And most of it is part of the terms. It's not abusive. But it's such a huge difference.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with people who do have accounts that are older than 2017, where they've got, very, I think Amazon holds back 40% of their payment each pay cycle. that it starts to make more sense to be able to, batch those inventory cycles out to, like you were saying, avoid the spikes and to, get a little bit more systematic with the inventory turns.
Now, once you do this, once you spread out those decisions and the shipments of the inventory, you will be paying a down payment each week, and after a few weeks, you will also be paying the difference, but it's going to be constant. It's going to be a matter of regular expenses. You have part of your expenses, you have to pay your bills, you have to pay this. It's going to be flat. And as soon as the inventory starts coming in, it's going to generate cash that covers the next payment, that covers the next payment, etc. It's also good for your supplier, because right now when he does these big batches, and he wants those big batches because it makes him feel secured.
Yeah.
But he gets a down payment. That down payment is mostly used to buy raw materials or inputs from other suppliers. It's mostly not his. And then he has to wait for all this time after he has put in the work and paid his workers and whatnot until the money comes in.
Yeah.
So he, on the one hand, he gets the security that I can write in my books that I have this coming, but on the other hand, he's working on empty. And when you start flowing and he gets a little bit every week,
yeah,
his cash flow balances out as well. And it's a very good basis for cooperation, for working together, for viewing the supply chain as a whole instead of separate businesses. Let's go back to the roles.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, what is the like a daily task?
So I have two other roles before we go to the daily tasks.
Oh, the roles, yes.
Now, the operative role of the manager, of the owner, is to do internal and external control. In the internal control, we check that we did what we planned. So we check ourselves against the plan. In the external control, we check the market against our forecasting. So is the market bullish? Well, when like we thought it is more bullish? Is it less bullish? Maybe it's bearish. So you control those things, and those are separate controls. And internal control, and both of them actually are not meant to create any punishments. So this isn't a grade that you're in your control. It's just a mechanism for corrections. It's like a feedback mechanism. Somebody once explained to me how a feedback mechanism works in a plane. So you put the direction that you want the plane to go, and there is a mechanism, an automated mechanism that checks it every 5 minutes. And it comes back to the steering wheel and says, you're 1 degree off to this side, fix. And then it checks again, you're 1 degree off you're 3 degrees off to that side, check, fix. And you fix, and you fix, and you fix, and you fix. And on average, you're going in the right trajectory.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the same thing. This isn't criticism. This is just a mechanism to check where are we based on what we planned. And if we're not there, is it because we decided to change from the plan and we need to formalize this? Or is our forecast off? Something changed? And coronavirus taught us this. Nobody forecasted COVID.
Yeah.
And it happened, and you have to adjust. And you don't go to your forecasting person or your forecasting program and you say, shame on you. How didn't you forecast COVID? And this happens all the time, not at this scale, but every forecast will have things that have been unforecasted.
Yeah.
The only forecast we know to do well is back forecasting. So looking back and saying, Oh, yeah. So for next year, everybody's going to forecast what they'll do in case of a pandemic for 2021 and for 2022,
Yeah.
but it's not going to come then.
Yeah.
And finally, you have the ongoing follow-up and maintenance, just
Hmm.
making sure everything's working. And for daily tasks, now again, it's not necessarily daily.
Mm. Yeah.
It depends mostly on the size of the business and the velocity of your SKUs. Um, it's really important that we know where our inventory is throughout the supply chain, and this is something that I rarely see.
Yeah.
I actually want to know, what did I order, what started production, what's finished production, what's in, done with QC, what's going to the port or to the airport, what's en route, what's in customs, what's on the truck going to the warehouse,
Hmm.
what's, if you have that entire picture, and this isn't automated in any system that I know of, so you have to get the reports and you have to um, formalize them into your system. You can't do it manually. Believe me, I tried. And
Hmm.
you can't have your suppliers and your consultants cooperating. This has to be one point of contact
Hmm.
because otherwise it's extremely confusing.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the reasons we built the order tracker, just, how many, there's so many balls in the air. You have to have like, okay, what things are in production, and then when are they going to go to, when are they going to actually land? That was a thing that was really confusing for me when I'm, in running my businesses,
Hmm.
constantly sending an email to the supplier or the supply chain manager. When is this going to be done? When are we going to ship this out? And trying to keep track of that and have it in a visual sense, became very important.
If you can get all the partners to report to your system or connect to your system, it's amazing. And the reason this is so important is what you can then do when you flow your inventory and fill your pipeline with that flow. Is, let's say we've had a change. I really like this example. I always use it. One of the Kardashian sisters informed the world that she doesn't like pink anymore, and the new color is gray. And you have pink and you have gray. But gray was always a slower seller than pink, so you have less inventory of it.
Hmm.
And now the market has changed like that.
Yeah.
And what you can do when you do the regular, okay, here's my order for the next 4 months, and it will take 2.5 months for supplier to produce it and ship it, and then it will be on the sea, and it will take another 3 weeks to get here, and then I can start selling it, is that you run out of the gray you have,
Yeah.
and then you have to wait 6 weeks until some new grays come in, and maybe the market will still be there for you and maybe it won't.
Hmm. Yeah.
But if you have a flow in your supply chain and you know where everything is, you actually know that you have a batch of gray in production for a week now. You give your supplier a call and say, listen, this is what's going on. Can we expedite just this and put it on a plane so I can have it in 3 days before I stock, even before I stock out.
Hmm.
And then when all your competitors stock out because they couldn't do that,
Yeah.
they didn't have those little batches all through the supply chain, and they didn't have that visibility of the supply chain.
Yeah.
You take the market
Hmm.
until it's gone.
Yeah.
When they get their new grays, everybody who wanted it got it from you.
Hmm. Yeah. That's good. Yeah, it's very important. Like, I actually have a little bit of like a cautionary tale. A competitor of ours who we actually are friends with, we both sell our best selling product. We're the same product. And we came into a mastermind. He's like, hey, I'm your competitor, by the way. And so he was telling us, he's like, I did something horrible. I bought 60,000 units. I think at that time that was like 10 months worth of inventory, 60,000 units of the product. Then everyone upgraded this cap on the product. including us, and he couldn't get rid of it. He couldn't get rid of the product because he had this great deal, great, percentage off, whatever. And then the market shifted and he had all this stuff. He had all this inventory he couldn't then pay for. A friend of ours who's in the liquidation business contacted us and tried to sell it to us. So, and he's no longer selling on Amazon. So it's just one of these things, nice guy, but just that their inventory mistakes can be the nail in your coffin, especially when you overstock and you completely, that where we talk about scaling, your money's all tied up in this inventory and you can't launch any new products to, go with the market.
Yeah, basically by buying a bigger batch, you are distancing yourself from the market.
Yeah.
And these changes like this, where Khloe Kardashian or whatever changed in the entire market, or you get, this public scare, nobody's going to buy plastic with PVAs or any other letter combinations.
Mm-hmm.
They happen, but they're much rarer. What really usually happens is the slow trickling changes that you don't even notice.
Mm-hmm.
But you bought enough for 4 months, and 7 months later, you still have some of it because the market just switched a little bit, changed a little bit, something happened, but you are 4 months away from the market in your reaction time.
Yeah.
You can't do that. You have to be as close to your market as you can.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if your MOQs and your lead times lead you to have a 12-week supply time,
Mm-hmm.
there's really not much you can do about it when you're small. But simply by having, again, that full channel, that full that full pipeline, once I realize that something has changed, I look at what I have and I create a game plan for it.
Mm-hmm.
If it's everybody decided that blue plastic is poisonous, I'm going to write off all my blue plastic or put it away for next year if I can justify that financially. Maybe that scare will go away.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not that major, I'll make a game plan. How am I going to, do I need to expedite this to flush it out as soon as possible? Can I change something with it? If something is still in production, immediately call the supplier. What can we do? Can we stop it? Can we change it? Can we shift it? In sewing, anything that's sewn has so much leeway to call the production site and say, we just found out that the big size isn't going at all. Can you take everything we ordered in big and sew it in small? And we'll still pay you the big size. That you're not going to have to, you can't do anything about that difference in pay in prices, but it's very minor.
Yeah.
Because if they already cut it in big, they can recut it to small, but the difference is scrap.
Yeah.
If you'll pay them for this, if you say you are going to get paid for the scrap that we created, you're going to get something you can sell at a slightly smaller margin.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of a ton of stuff you can't sell at all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I like this idea of just communicating with the supplier. A lot of the time we don't really understand what happens. What are the reasons one of the reasons the MOQ is the MOQ. That was one thing that was very eye-opening. Had a supplier, we bought a certain product from that supplier, then we wanted a combo product, and the MOQ was so much higher. We're like, well, why is the MOQ higher? Oh, we have, out of this combo of 4 things, this one supplier has an MOQ of this. So that's why our entire MOQ is higher. And so we say, okay, well, can we just pay for that one MOQ for that one, and then pay the rest with a smaller MOQ that we're used to? And they, oh yeah, and just you keep that, and that way that we're gonna continue to buy from you you just keep that raw material. So it's important to have these conversations with the supplier. Why is the MOQ the way it is? Why are the terms the way they are? What would be, a conducive, adjustment to the MOQ or to the terms? If you can understand, those things, if you can understand more about the supplier's business, you can start to figure out and think of creative solutions that helps, both sides.
Totally. There are two industries that I know a bit more about. One is the cut and sew.
Mm-hmm.
If your supplier is also going to color the fabric,
Mm-hmm.
coloring and cutting are batching processes.
Mm-hmm.
They have to batch them in order to be profitable.
Mm-hmm.
Sewing is done one by one. There is some kind of batching because the seamstresses and the people on the sewing machine, they get into a rhythm. You
Mm-hmm.
don't want to break it too fast. But about a dozen is a batch in sewing, which is not too bad.
Yeah.
Whereas in cutting and coloring, it's about 1,000 units.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the other thing is plastics. Changing the mold is a very big setup.
Yeah.
In order to justify it, you need to churn out a few hours of work before you move to the next setup.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then the question should be, how can you do more child ASINs on the same design?
Mm-hmm.
So work with the production sites to create a better combination. So let's say you have a bottle and a cap.
Mm-hmm.
Your MOQ is actually going to be a combination of the bottle MOQ and the cap MOQ.
Mm-hmm.
Now look at having other bottles and other caps and combinations of those.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, you may have a pink bottle with a pink cap and a rose gold bottle with a rose gold cap. Check with the market. Maybe they want a pink bottle with a rose gold cap and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can split your MOQ between two SKUs.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Anything you can do to split MOQs between SKUs gives you more flexibility.
Mm-hmm. That's great. All right, let me see what other questions we might have. Now we're getting to the hour mark. I wanted to see if is there anything specifically like on your notes or anything that you can kind of provide us insight? We talked about capital turnover.
Yes, so I actually had something interesting to say about valuations.
Mm-hmm.
So I've talked with some people, and the valuations in the e-commerce industry, in the retail e-commerce industry, are at about 1 or 2 on your annual profit.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the numbers that I'm seeing.
Uh-huh.
I think there are some people who might be going for about a multiplier of 1 on sales in some cases, but
Mm-hmm.
most people don't go out for multipliers on sales. You multiply on profit.
Yeah.
And the average is about 2,
Mm-hmm.
a multiplier of 2, and a very high would be a multiplier of maybe 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Brick and mortar retail businesses sell for a multiplier of 10.
Mm.
If you look at Amazon valuation, they're over 100.
Mm-hmm.
And that means to me that there is a problem with the way internet retail, retail in e-commerce is working. And people know that the business they're going to get is very small,
Mm-hmm.
and it lacks efficiencies. It's not tight enough. And when you do evaluation, you basically look at how much revenue a business makes,
Mm-hmm.
and how much profit it knows to make on that revenue.
Yeah.
And well, let's see, I wrote this down. And their track record. So if you've only had 2 good months, your valuation would be lower than if you can show you've been doing this for a year or 2 years.
Yeah.
But as soon as you create a process that you can prove, you can explain why you're having better months every month, you can get a lot of that value into your pocket. And I would want to see valuations going to 5 and more. And when a buyer comes in and he sees an efficient business that he knows he can take, and he doesn't have to do all the basic stuff, he can grow it because everything is working. And the biggest investment in retail is inventory.
Yeah.
And most Amazon sellers run their ship with a lot of inventory. And basically you will have about the same amount of money that you have in net profit at the end of the year, pre-tax. You'll have that same amount of money in inventory. Basically meaning that the money you have reported as profit isn't yours because you owe it to somebody. You're not supposed to go buy groceries with it.
Right.
So, and if I come to that buyer and I say, look, here's my business and I make 15% profit on the same $1 million, but I only have about a third of that in my inventory. So 10% is truly my profit. We're talking a whole different story. And I'm not going to sell it at a multiplier of 1. I can do that myself in a year. Yeah. I'm not going to sell in a multiplier of 2 because I do that in 2 years.
Right.
Start talking business with me.
Yeah.
And I understand why people sell, because when you sell, you actually get a big bulk of money. And if you are struggling a bit and Amazon's trickling the money to you and holding some of it and all of that, it's nice to have that breath of fresh air. But it's nicer to have 5 times that breath of fresh air, trust me.
Yeah.
So this is where I really want people to start going, to start understanding. And the question I want to ask people, since they're not asking us, I'll ask them instead, is, are you taking home a salary every month? Are you paying yourself first?
Yeah.
Because one of the biggest things that I see is that even though a business shows profitability, because of all that money in inventory, there is always a cash flow issue. So basically you're breaking even and you're working so hard, it's not good. You need to be able to take home a salary. And so you have to budget this first. If you can't create a budget that allows you to take a salary, you have to fix it. If you don't take a salary, you're not going to see that it's broken.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, that's one of the biggest issues for Amazon sellers is, looking at the cash flow and being able to understand. I think there are a lot of people who don't realize what their margins actually are, what their profit actually is. They don't really realize what's happening with their money because the payments are so spread out that they can think they're cash flow positive, but they're not. They're just spending tomorrow's money,
Yeah, it's quite difficult to understand what goes on with Amazon.
Yeah.
But the first thing I would do with any business is, first of all, do a scrub. Get some company who knows how to do the conciliation to get into your Amazon account and scrub it. Make sure that any money that Amazon owes you for inventory they misplaced, broke, incorrectly reported, whatever.
Yeah.
They will find it for you. They will contact Amazon and they will scrub your data. So you're actually improving your data in Amazon as you're doing this process of getting your money back.
Yeah.
And remember, people, the rule of garbage in, garbage out always works in life, in business decisions, in data sets. If your data in Amazon is garbage, the decisions you're going to make are garbage.
Yeah.
And if it's Amazon fault, it's Amazon fault. If it's not Amazon fault, I don't care whose fault it is. If the data is wrong, you can't make good decisions.
Yep.
If you created a shipping sticker, if you got a shipping barcode from Amazon, and now Amazon sees these units as GUN, and eventually you didn't send them, or the FedEx guy, God forbid, had an accident and the oil broke, you have to cancel that shipment. So it doesn't show as GUN in 3 months' time.
What's GUN?
GUN is inventory that's supposed to come. Amazon has in the inventory report, it tells you how much inventory you have, how much of that how much inventory you have that is reserved, which is sort of sellable but not exactly. So I like to be careful with it, but it also shows you how much inventory it's processing into the warehouses, how much inventory it's waiting to receive. All of that is GUN.
So does that hurt your Amazon account to have
inventory show up as GUN when it never arrives?
Yeah. So
no,
okay.
It just garbages your data.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. We correct for that in Seller or in a SoStocked for that very reason, because you can have a bunch of inventory that shows that it's inbound and you're going to park half of it at your warehouse. So that was one of the things that we had to handle, is being able to split it and say, okay, half of it's going to Amazon and half of it is sitting in a warehouse, you know, and even though I've printed labels for all of it, we're able to then split it out, which is, you know, it helps. Because yeah, if you think that, you know, if Amazon's telling you you've got this inbound inventory and it's not, you know, you can lose track of that stuff. And there are a lot of people who are making labels well in advance of sending stuff in.
Yeah, so that's really important. And the next thing I would do is create a plan for any excess inventory. Now, not all excess inventory was created similarly. There are different reasons for excess inventory, and and different SKUs deserve different plans of actions.
Yeah.
Because I want to get as much of that inventory out the door in the most profitable way. So it's not, okay, let's discount everything. Let's do a Prime Day sell out and try to get everything out the door in half the price. First of all, did you plan for that margin? So stuff that is just costing money, I don't care about margin, get it out the door. Other stuff that has a potential to sell, I'm going to look at margins and I'm going to create an action plan. Maybe it's worth my while to pay to have it removed from Amazon to the external warehouse for a while. Bring it back when time is better. Maybe it's worth my while to give a discount on it. Maybe it's worth my while to figure out how to give it as an upsell, how to connect it with other sellers that I have.
Yeah, and currently removal orders are free, but you usually get penalized in that you can't send inventory back in. So, you know, it might make sense to remove enough to last you, you know, you say, okay, I'm only keeping enough until I can send more in, and remove the rest. If you've got 6 months and they're saying, you know, you can't send anything for the next 3 months, maybe you remove 3 months worth and you keep 3 months worth.
Well, everything with Amazon, you have to remember that Amazon is not going to hurt themselves. So if they set a rule for you and things changed, you will be able to figure out a way how to contact them and tell them, listen, you're losing money if you don't let me do this. And I don't have proof, but you can see with the way they do things, they're looking out for number one.
Yeah.
So if
the stipulation is if sales do pick up, or if you're going to stock out, they will let you send more in.
If they don't, then you just have to find a way to contact somebody there. If you have a contact person, then fine. If you don't, then get through somebody who does, or try to get to them through their elusive
Yeah.
back end, and highlight the fact that if you don't sell, they don't get all the benefits of you selling. They don't get all their fees, and it should work itself out. But when we pull out inventory, we don't just say, okay, we have 100 units of excess storage, paying for long-term storage. Let's pull all 100 units.
Mm.
We are
Yeah.
looking at what is going to be sold in a logical amount of time,
Right.
and pulling everything above that,
Mhm.
even though we might be still paying excess storage or long-term fees for something. It doesn't make any sense at all to pull all the inventory out just to send it back the next day.
Yeah.
So you have to look at what's logical, even if it costs a little bit more.
Yeah. I would imagine, starting to put together, some kind of cheat sheets of what is your average LTL been for that product, what is your average, ocean freight, all of the different, kind of estimates as to, how much does it cost to generally send inventory from your warehouse into Amazon? Because without this data, there's a lot of, question marks. And without this data, you can't really do the math. If you have missing variables, you can't really do the math. So I think the first job that anyone has to take is to sit down and look at the past, say 4, months worth of shipments and say, okay, what is the average per unit of all of this, when I send a pallet in, or when I send, cartons in, what is the average cost that I'm spending, so that you can actually do the math. Because I think that's the thing, is there's a lot of missing data, so people don't ever do the math.
There is a website that somebody did long ago when offshoring became very big.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody shared it with me, but I have to dig it up. I will send it to you to share with everybody. There are 2 things I would like to highlight with that. One is to be very, very careful with turning bulk expenses into per unit expenses. There are things we're going to pay no matter how much we sell.
Yep.
If we do a shipment, there are payments that are due that don't change if we send 1 unit or a full container.
Yeah. Yep.
And when we split them up and do them per unit, we can accidentally start thinking about them in a per unit manner and forget that they're bulk.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we need to be very cognizant of is that there are one-time expenses and there are recurring expenses. So shipment happens once and storage happens monthly, weekly, depending on where you're stored at and what are your terms.
Right. Yeah.
Amazon actually charges basically per unit. Other warehouses would charge per pallet or a flat fee, or I don't know what, but when inventory sits for a long period of time, it accumulates a lot of storage fees.
Yeah.
Even if the storage is pretty cheap, it accumulates over time. And our mind has a lot of problems actually taking in all these different variables, and this happens only one time, and this is per unit, and that one adds up. And when somebody tells you a price, so it costs half $1 per month to store a pallet. Is that a lot or a little? How many pallets do I have? How many months am I going to store? You have to have all that added up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that's where we are very confused, because eventually what happens is we silo it down. We focus down on what we can do. And then we do a calculation and we come up with margin, for example. Margin takes into account the sell price we're planning, and the purchase price per unit that we agreed upon with the supplier.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why am I saying this in such a roundabout way? Because if we don't sell all the units, that number has no meaning, because what we paid is the number of units we bought times that number.
Mm-hmm.
And if
Plus
we
all
didn't sell
the
any,
monthly storage fees, like if you don't sell
even
with it
even
for 6 months, storage fees on top of that.
even without that, we paid for 1,000 units and we only sold 800, and 200 eventually went
Mm-hmm.
to the trash can.
Yeah.
We gave them presents at Christmas or
Mm-hmm.
something.
Yeah.
You now have to take the price of 1,000 units and divide it by 800 to get the price per unit sold.
Yeah.
And then you have a real margin.
Right.
Because you spend the money on it, the entire 1,000. Sell it, didn't sell it, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So when we make the decisions, we make them with the wrong piece of data, because we know how much we're paying per unit. We agreed to pay per unit with the supplier, but nobody tells us how many we're going to sell.
Right. Yeah, that's a very good point. All right. So how can people reach you? Do we have an email that we can send out for people
Yes,
to?
of course.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for
So
all
I wasn't thinking about webinars when I created this email account. My email account is Orion, like the star, at retail-ad-venture.com, and ad is with a double D. So Orion at retail-ad-venture.com, ad with a double D.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. So what I was gonna say. So I'm gonna send this out. You guys can if you have any questions, reach out to Orion, and I'm sure she'll be very happy to answer any questions that you have. And then real quick, if you guys are curious about SoStocked, if you don't have SoStocked and you're curious about it, I'm sharing the link in there. It's a 1 month free to give it a try, and then it'll be $59 every month after that. And so go ahead and give it a try. And we don't do these free offers. We only do them during our webinars. So it will only be available for the next, say, 72 hours by the end of the weekend, and then it will be gone. But hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you got some more insight, gets you thinking about different ways to look at your logistics. I think that that's one of the very valuable lessons that, you know, we kind of learned today is really starting to kind of think outside the box of what you're used to is really the message that I feel like I left with on this.
Yeah, I totally agree. That is a really good point, and I would love for you all to just challenge the conceptions that we get from everybody. I mean, so much has changed in the world over the last few hundred years, and inventory, the way inventory is managed is in computers, but it's using very, very old concepts. So it's time to freshen up, to realize that things have changed, but we're still acting like our ships go where the wind takes them, and we have to send letters with pigeons.
Yeah, that's true.
So there is so much benefit and so much upside for you from just challenging those conceptions. And I really, really, really hope you take on Chelsea's suggestion, generous offer to try SoStocked. It's really good to have control over your data and over your inventory, and challenge the conceptions, challenge the things you think are fixed.
Yeah. Yep. Don't.
And Chelsea, thank you so much for inviting me. I really love doing it.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you again so much. And thank you guys all for listening. Again, if you have any questions, go ahead and reach out to Orion, and hope to see you guys on the next one. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.